When someone accuses you of something or questions your intentions, your first instinct is usually to jump in and defend yourself. It feels necessary, almost urgent, like if you don't correct them immediately, their version of the story will become the truth. But what most people don't realize is that defending yourself in the moment can actually make things worse. When you rush to explain, justify, or prove your innocence, it can unintentionally signal that the accusation has weight. Even if it's completely false, your emotional reaction gives the other person something to hold on to. Instead of clearing your name, you often end up reinforcing the very thing you're trying to avoid. The energy of defense adds fuel, and suddenly a small misunderstanding becomes a larger conflict. This happens because defending yourself shifts the focus away from the facts and onto your emotional response. When someone sees you react strongly, they may assume there's something you're trying to hide. They may think you're trying to cover something up or control the narrative. But when you stay calm, grounded, and steady, you send a different message, one that says you're confident in your intentions and not shaken by someone else's assumptions. Calmness communicates truth in a way defensive words never can. People feel your energy before they process your explanation, and if your energy is frantic, they read it as guilt. If your energy is calm, they read it as clarity. Another thing to understand is that not every accusation is meant to discover the truth. Some people criticize you because they're frustrated, insecure, or projecting something from their own lives. They're not asking for clarity, they're asking for control. And when you defend yourself, you hand them the control they're seeking. You give them the power to decide how the conversation unfolds, how you feel, and how you react. They lead and you follow. But when you choose not to defend, you stay in the driver's seat of your emotions. You respond intentionally instead of reacting impulsively. You show that their assumptions don't intimidate you and their words don't define you. This doesn't mean you ignore everything or stay silent in every situation. It means you choose responses that are rooted in confidence, not fear. Instead of saying, no, that's not true, let me explain, you can say, that's not accurate, or I see it differently, or I'm not going to argue about this. Short, clear statements carry far more weight than long explanations. They close the door on unnecessary debate instead of opening one. They communicate strength without aggression. They tell the other person that you're not here to compete, justify, or convince. You're here to communicate respectfully, and that's it. When you stop defending yourself, you make space for people to think for themselves. Those who trust you will continue to trust you. Those who doubt you will doubt you, no matter how much you explain. And those who misunderstand you may eventually correct their own perception when they see you standing steady in your truth. What you say matters, but how you carry yourself matters more. When your actions consistently align with your values, you won't need to defend yourself. Your character becomes your explanation. The freedom that comes from not defending yourself is powerful. You stop chasing people's approval and start respecting your own boundaries. You stop getting pulled into emotional traps and start communicating from a place of clarity. You stop letting false assumptions dictate your mood and start protecting your peace. And once you experience that level of emotional control, you won't want to go back to the old patterns of over-explaining ever again. When conversations become heated or emotions start to rise, most people instinctively match the intensity of the moment. Someone raises their voice and you feel yours rising too. Someone becomes sharp and you respond with the same edge. It's a natural reaction, but it's also the exact moment where communication breaks down. When emotions take over, clarity disappears. That's why calm clarity speaks louder than any emotional reaction ever could. Calmness isn't weakness, it's control. It's the quiet confidence that shows you are not easily pulled into chaos. When you stay composed, you guide the tone of the conversation instead of being shaped by it. Calm clarity isn't about suppressing your feelings. It's about choosing which part of you shows up in the moment. You can feel frustrated, hurt, or misunderstood and still respond with intention. That's what emotional maturity looks like, the ability to stay steady even when your internal world is shaking a bit. People remember how you made them feel much more than the exact words you used. And when you show calmness in the face of tension, you create safety. You show that you're not here to fight, but you're also not here to surrender your boundaries. You're here to communicate, not react. This kind of presence disarms conflict more effectively than any defensive argument. When you respond emotionally, it gives others leverage. They can point to your tone, your reactions, your intensity. But when you stay calm, you remove that leverage entirely. You give them nothing to push against. It becomes harder for them to escalate the situation because you're not participating in the escalation. You're modeling the behavior you want in return. And whether they match it immediately or not, your composure influences the direction of the conversation. Calm is contagious. Just like tension can spread quickly in a room, so can steadiness. Clarity is what separates calmness from silence. Calm clarity means you know what you want to say and why you're saying it. You're not rambling. You're not over-explaining. You're not trying to win the argument or prove yourself. You're simply expressing the truth in a way that is grounded and steady. When you speak with clarity, people hear you differently. Your words carry weight because they're not wrapped in emotional noise. You sound like someone who has thought things through, someone who knows themselves, someone who can be trusted. When you speak from calm clarity, even simple sentences hit harder. A gentle but firm, "I don't see it that way," has more power than a long emotional justification. The real strength of calm clarity shows up when someone tries to provoke you. There will always be people who poke at your buttons, intentionally or not. They may want a reaction, or they may be acting from their own stress. When you refuse to match their intensity, you keep the power on your side. You're not letting their emotions dictate your behavior. You're not stepping into their chaos. You're showing that your emotional thermostat is set by you, not by external pressure. And that gives you an advantage in any interaction, professionally, personally, or emotionally. Over time, calm clarity rewires how people interact with you. They stop trying to push your buttons because they realize it doesn't work. They communicate with you more respectfully because they know you won't entertain unnecessary drama. Your boundaries become clearer without you having to fight for them. You speak less, but say more. You stay calmer but get heard more. You elevate your communication without raising your voice. Calm clarity is your anchor. It protects your peace, strengthens your relationships, and communicates confidence without aggression. And when people see that you can stay steady in moments when others fall apart, they begin to trust not just your words, but your presence. Boundaries are one of those things everyone talks about, but very few people actually practice with consistency. Most people think boundaries are about telling others what they can or cannot do, but that's not it at all. Boundaries are really about communicating what you will or will not allow in your own life. They are about protecting your peace, your energy, and your emotional space. When you have strong boundaries, the need to defend yourself naturally fades because your boundaries do the communicating for you. Instead of constantly explaining why you made a choice or why you said no, your actions and limits speak on your behalf. You don't need to justify your decisions when your boundaries are clear. The problem is many people feel guilty about setting boundaries. They worry they'll upset someone or be seen as difficult or selfish, so they keep explaining themselves, hoping the explanation will soften the impact. But that explanation often leads to negotiation, and negotiation leads to resentment. When you justify your boundaries, you indirectly teach people that your limits are flexible. You teach them that your no isn't really a no. It's an invitation to push back. And once people know they can push, they usually will. Not because they're bad, but because you've shown them where the door is open. Boundaries aren't meant to be explained into existence. They're meant to be lived into existence. The truth is, people who care about you won't demand long explanations when you set a boundary. They may ask questions for understanding, but they won't pressure you. They won't guilt you. They won't punish you. The people who get upset when you set a boundary are often the ones who benefited from you having none. And that discomfort they show isn't a sign that your boundary is wrong. It's a sign that your boundary is working. When your boundary is clear and consistent, you don't need to defend it. You simply hold it. You stay calm. You repeat it if needed, but you don't debate it. A boundary is not a courtroom. It's a personal decision. Boundaries also help you stay grounded because they remove the guesswork from your communication. You don't have to figure out what to say when someone crosses a line you already know. You don't have to scramble for reasons or justify your feelings. You already have your standard. And when you have that internal standard, your communication becomes cleaner, shorter, and more confident. You stop explaining your whole life story. You stop apologizing for choosing yourself. You stop defending your decisions as if you're on trial. Instead, you stand in your truth with a quiet confidence that doesn't need permission. There's a powerful shift that happens when you move from defending yourself to enforcing your boundaries. Defending yourself focuses on what the other person thinks. Enforcing your boundaries focuses on what you know. One is reactive. The other is proactive. One drains you. The other strengthens you. When you defend, you hope the other person will understand or approve. When you set a boundary, you don't need their approval. You only need your consistency. The irony is that when you stop explaining yourself and start holding boundaries, people tend to respect you more. You're no longer the person who gets pulled into every emotional storm or pressured into decisions you don't want to make. You become the calm one, the steady one, the person who knows what they stand for and where they stand. And that kind of presence changes the dynamic of every conversation you enter. It shows people that you value your time, your energy, and your emotional well-being. It shows them you're not interested in drama, arguments, or unnecessary back and forth. You're here to communicate clearly and respectfully, and you expect the same in return. Boundaries allow you to move through life without constantly proving or defending yourself. They give you the framework to communicate from a place of inner authority instead of insecurity. When your boundaries are strong, your words become fewer, your reactions become calmer, and your confidence becomes unmistakable. One of the most liberating realizations you can have is understanding that being understood is optional. We spend so much of our lives trying to explain ourselves, trying to make people see our perspective, trying to control how they interpret our choices. But the truth is, no matter how clearly you speak or how carefully you explain, some people will misunderstand you anyway. And the harder you work to make them understand, the more tangled you become in their expectations, their judgments, and their assumptions. Being grounded, on the other hand, has nothing to do with being understood. It has everything to do with knowing who you are, what you stand for, and how you choose to show up. You can be deeply grounded even when others don't get you, and that grounding becomes your calm in every storm. When you prioritize being understood, your communication becomes reactive. You're constantly adjusting yourself based on how you think others see you. You soften your boundaries to avoid disappointing people. You over-explain to avoid being judged. You apologize just to keep the peace. And all those small compromises slowly erode your self-respect. You start depending on external validation to feel steady inside. But when you're grounded, you communicate from a place of self-respect instead of self-doubt. You don't need to convince anyone of your intentions. You don't need to prove your worth. You don't need to justify your choices. You speak your truth with clarity and let people interpret it however they choose. The people who truly matter, the ones who value you, won't demand that you explain every detail of your life. They won't make your decisions about them. They won't expect you to shrink so they can feel more comfortable. They'll trust your character even when they don't understand your choices. But the people who insist on explanations are often seeking control, not understanding. They want you to defend yourself because it keeps them in the position of power. They want you to justify your decisions because it keeps the dynamic on their terms. When you realize this, you stop giving that kind of power away. You stop jumping every time someone questions you. You stop taking every comment personally. You become more selective about what and who deserves access to your inner world. Being grounded means you answer with calm, not with panic. Instead of a long explanation, you can say, "This is the decision I'm making," or "I'm comfortable with my choice," or "I hear you, but I see it differently." Short, firm, steady responses, they shut down unnecessary debate without creating conflict. They show that you're not hiding anything, but you're also not seeking approval. Grounded people don't argue their worth. They don't negotiate their values. They don't chase validation. Their calm is their clarity. When you release the need to be understood, you gain emotional freedom. You stop replaying conversations in your head. You stop trying to control how others perceive you. You stop taking responsibility for reactions that belong to other people, not to you. Misunderstandings stop feeling like personal failures. You understand that your job is to communicate honestly and respectfully. And that's it. How someone chooses to interpret your words is a reflection of their own mindset, not your character. The more grounded you become, the less effort communication requires. You don't scramble for the perfect words. You don't fear judgment. You don't react from insecurity. You speak from a centered place, and people feel that. They may not always agree with you, but they sense your steadiness. And that steadiness earns more respect than any explanation ever could. Grounding yourself is ultimately an internal decision. It's choosing to trust your own judgment even when others don't. It's choosing to stand firm even when someone tries to shake your confidence. It's choosing your peace over proving a point. And once you experience the strength that comes from being grounded and not from being understood, you'll never want to go back to defending yourself again. Silence is one of the most misunderstood communication tools because people often confuse it with weakness, avoidance, or surrender. But silence, when used intentionally, is one of the strongest responses you can give. Silence isn't the absence of a reaction, it's the presence of control. It shows that you're not moved by pressure, not intimidated by accusations, and not willing to engage in conversations that drain your energy or compromise your self-respect. When you choose silence, you're choosing not to participate in emotional chaos. You're choosing not to give someone access to your inner world when they haven't earned that privilege. You're choosing your peace over your impulse to react. Most arguments and misunderstandings escalate because both people feel the need to respond instantly. The conversation begins to move faster than their clarity can keep up. Emotions take over. Tone takes over. Ego takes over. Silence interrupts that rush. It brings the pace back down. It creates space for you to think, breathe, and ground yourself before you say something you'll regret. Silence is a reset button in communication. It prevents you from reacting impulsively and allows you to respond intentionally. And in that pause, you reclaim your power. You stop letting someone else's intensity drag you into a position you didn't choose. Silence is especially powerful when someone is trying to provoke you. People who want a reaction often expect you to defend yourself, argue back, or fall into emotional traps. When you respond with silence, you break that pattern. You show them that their attempt to upset or control you doesn't work. You're not playing the game. You're not getting pulled into unnecessary drama. Silence puts the responsibility back on them to manage their own emotions. It forces them to sit with their own words without using your reaction as a distraction or justification. There's another layer to silence that people don't talk about enough. Silence can communicate confidence more effectively than words. When you don't rush to defend yourself, it signals that you are secure in your intentions. When you don't justify every decision, it shows that you believe in your choices. When you don't explain your boundaries, it lets others know those boundaries are firm. Silence, combined with calm body language and steady energy, sends a message that is louder than a long explanation ever could. People listen differently when you speak from calm, but they observe even more carefully when you choose not to speak at all. Silence is not the same as shutting down. It's not stonewalling. It's not pretending nothing is happening. It's choosing when your voice adds value and when it doesn't. Silence can sound like, I'm thinking, I'm not engaging with this, or I refuse to let this escalate. It can be a moment of reflection or a moment of self-protection. The key is intention. Silence rooted in strength feels very different from silence rooted in fear. Strong silence is steady and calm. It's controlled. It's deliberate. And people feel that difference. In emotional conversations, silence can also create accountability. When someone says something hurtful or unfair and you don't react, they often begin to reflect on their own behavior. Your lack of response becomes a mirror. Your silence makes them hear their own tone louder. Your calm makes their intensity look exaggerated. And without you saying a single word, the dynamic shifts. They realize the weight of their words, not because you explained it, but because you refuse to feed into it. Ultimately, silence protects your peace. It gives you time to center yourself. It prevents unnecessary conflict. It communicates confidence. It reinforces your boundaries. And it teaches others how to speak to you. You don't have to defend yourself every time someone questions you. You don't have to react every time someone tries to pull you into their emotional storm. You don't have to explain your decisions to people who aren't listening in good faith. Sometimes the strongest answer, the most grounded, powerful, self-respecting answer is no answer at all.